Welcome to the channel, guys. My name is Jess. So Bitcoin has continued to struggle against $112,000, and this resistance might actually be telling us a little bit more than it seems. Today we'll be diving into the charts to take a look at the 2021 pattern that marked the top for Bitcoin and how a similar thing is happening right now in 2025. We'll break down exactly what needs to happen for these warning signs to play out and take a closer look at both these shorter and higher timeframe charts. If you've been following this cycle closely, these are one of those moments worth paying attention to. Let's get into it. As always, before we jump in, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And sign up to my free Telegram for more regular Bitcoin analysis. If you're a trader and you're interested in joining my VIP channel, be sure to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setups with exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Alrighty guys, so diving into the charts, let's talk about all the recent price action and $112,000 and why it is currently so important. So for those of you guys who don't know, 112 is currently Bitcoin's new all-time high. We tapped it, I think, last Thursday on the 22nd of May, and it was pretty much exactly $111,950. Now, since then, Bitcoin has been in a little bit of a short time frame downtrend. Right after my last video on Friday, some new tariff news came out about the Europe, and I think there are new tariffs coming out in June. It's been postponed to July now, but that basically caused a pretty big tumble right here, losing our short time frame base of support at $110,000. Bitcoin tumbled all the way back down to retest the prior daily chart all-time high, the daily close at 106,000, and since then we've sort of been in a chop zone between 106 and 110, that prior level of support. So essentially, as Bitcoin continues to travel in this stalemate that's happening right now, and the climate surrounding Bitcoin continues to become more and more uncertain. For example, Trump's been consistently releasing inconsistent news about tariffs, and that is pretty pervasive, and that affects not only the trade itself, but other things such as inflation and the way that America's economy is going to go, which of course affects the markets. And so we're going to talk about in today's video the sort of positioning that Bitcoin is in right now between what could be an exceptionally bullish trigger and an exceptionally bearish one. We're going to talk about mostly sort of this bearish case scenario because I think the bullish is pretty obvious, right? If we've managed to push back above $110,000 and establish support there, breaking above 112, we're sort of in the clear a little bit more, and we can expect obviously continued price action, price discovery, and a movement to those whole numbers as discussed in last videos like 115, 120, and so on and so forth. But as we continue to consolidate, some warning signs are really popping up across the charts, and we've got to talk about the absolute cliff that Bitcoin is on right now and why that would be so important, how we could potentially be marking the top here if something doesn't change in the price action soon. So to talk about all that, we're going to move into the weekly time frame and talk about a 2021 pattern that basically marked the top for Bitcoin back in that prior bull run or cycle. Well, let's actually first of all talk about what we're seeing in the current segment of price action, right? Well, just in case for the viewers that haven't really been paying attention to what's been going on the weekly time frame, let's go over that first. So on Bitcoin here on the weekly time frame, we have recently broken out of this very important weekly range, right? We had a base of that at 93,000, and the top of that was this weekly candle close at $104,000, right? And that had previously marked out this really clear sort of horizontal chop zone, where upon finally losing the base of that, closing below that here, moved all the way down to retest $81,000, and then this prior level of support here at 73, 74K as well. And that is when we bounced. We tapped the Gaussian channel on the weekly time frame, as well as the 50 EMA on the market cipher A, and we saw a massive bounce to recover back into this weekly channel over here. And not only did we recover into it, but 2-3 weeks ago, we actually closed above the top of $104,000, the top of our weekly range, and we saw a macro breakout, right? And that is why the recent price action has been looking so bullish. Now, alongside all of that price action there, what we've also been seeing though is on the RSI, continuing weakness. We had our first instance of bearish divergence over here between these two highs. We had a high on the price action and lower highs. So the momentum was slowing down, and we saw the correction there, moving back down to retest the base of bull market sort of momentum for this current cycle at 44.41. And upon tapping that, as well as all those sort of levels on the price action as well, we saw that bounce, right? So that bearish divergence has been done. It's happened and it's over. Now, what we're currently seeing though, with this next breakout and the current higher highs developing on the price action, is a secondary instance of bearish divergence. So we've got 3 peaks here of high time frame developing weakness, and the price action has started to really struggle pushing into new highs. So all of those are sort of really large macro warning signs. Now, putting that as our context, let's move over and take a look at 2021. So in 2021, we had a massive deviation pattern as well. We had the exact same as what we're seeing, or not the exact same, but very similar to what we're seeing right now. 3 instances or 3 peaks and 2 instances of bearish divergence. We had the first one over here where Bitcoin created the weekly range for 2021. Right, we saw a brief breakdown over here to retest that sort of prior level of support at $29,000, very similar to what we've just recently seen. Pushed back above into the weekly range over here. We did have a slight period of consolidation against the midline resistance. And then eventually breaking back above the top of the weekly range. Very similar to this time, we created a new all-time high at $69,000. Briefly after, crashing back down below the weekly range. And that is when we eventually topped out and moved all the way down to $16,000 where Bitcoin bottomed, and we saw the new cycle begin, and so on and so forth. So we can see very clearly how currently the price action is looking very similar. We have 3 instances of not 3 instances, 3 peaks and 2 instances of bearish diversion. So we're seeing macro weakness as momentum decreases moving throughout this period. We're seeing continued struggle developing this new all-time high and, sort of pushing into price discovery. And the play out of this pattern and sort of potentially marking the top here for Bitcoin would be then one of the warning signs that we have now is the breakdown of the top of our weekly range at currently $104,000, right? So that is sort of as we chop between $106,000 and $110,000 right now. If we see that breakdown of the monthly uptrend or our 2-month-long uptrend, we could very well see a breakdown of those levels and fall back into the weekly range as well. Now, the interesting thing about using historical patterns or sort of fractal analysis is that history does often rhyme, but it doesn't exactly repeat, right? So while this marked out the sort of macro top of Bitcoin in this segment or in this cycle, and we went on to enter a bear cycle or a bear market, and where we went all the way down to 16,000, that might not be necessarily what Bitcoin exactly goes on to do here. This might potentially just mark a period where Bitcoin just corrects to retrace sort of midline resistance or even the base of this weekly channel before potentially recovering. All of that is still kind of on the cards, and we'll go over, I think, when the breakdown happens, what bear market signals really are, because it's obviously not just going to be that one horizontal level and RSI bearish divergence. There are many other things, the Gaussian channel in the 3-day time frame, the midlines, Ichimoku. There's so many things to be looking out for that actually confirm the bear market, and those are sort of things we'll talk about when it actually happens. It's not really worth going into in this particular video, but what we will talk about as we sort of approach what clearly is a little bit of a cliff for Bitcoin or a big red flag, what is going to signal that on these smaller time frame charts. So zooming over onto the daily time frame, let's talk about the triggers that we have here on the daily chart for a short-term correction and how that short-term correction could then develop into more red flags on that weekly or higher time frame chart. So here on the daily chart, we can see very clearly our current bi-monthly uptrend. We've been in it for 49 days, and it has essentially marked out the entire recovery since bottoming or establishing that local bottom at $74,000. And so it's evidently pretty important, right? And over the last couple of days particularly, we have seen consistent or more consistent retests of that level of structural support, and particularly as Bitcoin sort of compresses against $110,000 and $106,000, we're seeing continued and repetitive retests of that trend line as support. And we all know generally the more retests we have of support, whether that be structural, horizontal, or dynamic support, the more likely we are to break down from that level or absorb the buying pressure that exists at that level. And so if we break down from the daily time frame, it's very likely that the first stage of the correction will take Bitcoin to go on and retest the prior low, being $106,000 right here. All right, so first of all, 107, then 106. And that second retest of $106,000 is probably the most important thing that we have here in terms of preventing the red flags continuing to develop on the weekly time frame charts. And the reason for that is if we take a look at 106K, not only is it the level of support on the daily time frame, it being the prior daily candle close high, but also it is the final level of support that we have just above this liquidity zone right here, right? Starting from 105.7 all the way down to $100,000. And that's important because generally when we enter liquidity zones, the price action will continue to travel within that zone. And right here at this purple trend line is the weekly range, the top of that weekly range. So if Bitcoin does push below $106,000 and we enter this liquidity zone, there is more of a probability that we end up going to travel within that zone, tapping $100,000, this base of support here, as we've seen in repetitive losses of $106,000, right? That movement to $100,000. And in that circumstance, if we travel there for long enough for the weekly close to stay below the weekly range, we have officially then broken back down from the top of that weekly range. But otherwise, what this chart also tells us though is even if Bitcoin breaks down from the structural trend line, but we don't lose $106,000, a bullish continuation is still very much on the cards. If we bounce from 106, this massive change of character level, there is a high potential for Bitcoin to then, continue to consolidate and finally gather the strength, to push past 112 and move back into price discovery, targeting 115, 120, and so on and so forth. So that's a wrap on the high time frame analysis for today, guys. Clearly, there is some really, really crucial price action to be watching out for ahead. I feel like I say that every couple of videos, but truly, I mean it every time I say it. And so that is sort of how to map out the significance of the stalemate that is happening on the short time frame price action for Bitcoin right now, and the significance of our current bi-monthly uptrend, $106,000, and the top of our weekly range, and how all those levels have a lot of high time frame significance and how they could play out to be slightly bearish and potentially significantly bearish, and otherwise pushing above $110,000 in buy side liquidity over here, maybe even invalidating this upper trend line that we have on these short time frame charts. Let's get rid of that. How that could lead to an invalidation of sort of the current bearish scenario happening on the high time frame, and a push back up into 112 without the headache of all that. Alrighty guys, that is a wrap on the analysis for today. Thank you for tuning in for another episode. If you enjoyed the video or you learned something, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And join my free Telegram for more regular Bitcoin updates. If you're interested in my VIP trading channel, don't forget to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setups with exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!